That pure honey jar in your pantry has been murdered at 160 degrees Fahrenheit, not to preserve it, but to kill something. Honey doesn't spoil. Archaeologists found 3,000-year-old honey in Egyptian tombs still edible. So why heat it? To destroy the enzyme that turns honey from sugar into a medical-grade antibiotic. This enzyme generates hydrogen peroxide that kills MRSA, E. coli, bacteria modern drugs can't touch. But your supermarket honey? Dead. Just expensive syrup. Medieval surgeons knew what modern medicine buried. Raw honey fights, superbugs without resistance. In this video, we expose who murdered your honey, why, and how to find the real medicine. If you're ready, let's begin. To fully understand the anatomy of this biological crime, we must first examine the murder weapon. Industrial pasteurization and ultrafiltration. This story doesn't start in a sun-drenched meadow among wildflowers and buzzing bees, as you might think. This story begins in the early 20th century, in a cold industrial facility, completely detached from nature. At that time, food engineers were figuring out how to make honey shelf-stable and consumer-friendly. Code words for maximizing profit. And they discovered a method that could be considered catastrophic. If you take raw honey and heat it above 70 degrees Celsius, you could force it to remain liquid forever. The result of this industrial process, called pasteurization, was a substance that looked like honey but had nothing to do with the medicine our ancestors used. What emerged was a clear, golden liquid that never crystallized. It looked perfect, it behaved like honey when you spread it on toast, but on a molecular level, when you put it under a microscope, it is a corpse, because this heating process destroyed glucose oxidase and created hydroxymethylfurfuryl, HMF, a degradation compound signaling the honey's biological machinery, has been cooked to death. So, why were they going to heat honey when it's already the most shelf-stable food on Earth? Literally the only food that never spoils without refrigeration. This is where industrial efficiency and consumer psychology came into play. The first reason is crystallization. Raw honey naturally crystallizes over time as glucose molecules bond together and form orderly crystal structures. This is a spontaneous physical process, completely harmless, easily reversible. To consumers trained by decades of industrial food marketing, however, crystallized honey looks old, spoiled, or inferior, even though it's chemically identical to liquid honey and perfectly safe. Heating dissolves these crystals, breaking the molecular bonds and returning the honey to its liquid state, giving it that clear, golden, pourable appearance that moves product off shelves faster. The second reason is bottling speed and manufacturing efficiency. Liquid honey flows through high-speed industrial filling machines 3 times faster than thick, crystallized honey. Time is money in industrial food production. The bee's 6-week labor, involving millions of flower visits and thousands of hours of wing fanning evaporation, is sacrificed for a 3-second efficiency gain on a conveyor belt. The third reason, rarely admitted but economically critical, is blending budding. Liquid honey from different sources, different countries, different quality grades, even honey adulterated with corn syrup, can be mixed together seamlessly when it's all heated and liquefied. Crystallization would expose these blends for what they truly are. But here's the biological crime. When you heat honey above 45 degrees Celsius, you start denaturing the enzymes that make it medicinal. The most critical casualty is glucose oxidase, an enzyme bees add from glands in their heads. When honey is applied to a wound or diluted with fluid, glucose oxidase catalyzes a reaction that breaks glucose into gluconic acid and hydrogen peroxide, H2OS. It's released slowly and continuously at concentrations high enough to sterilize wounds, but low enough not to damage human tissue. Studies have shown raw honey can kill MRSA, Pseudomonas, and E. coli strains that laugh at antibiotics. But pasteurized honey? The enzyme is dead. No peroxide is generated. You're left with only osmotic pressure, the ability to draw water out of bacterial cells. That's a weak, passive mechanism compared to the active chemical warfare of enzyme-generated peroxide. Imagine the chaos your body experiences when you consume this substance. Your immune system is like a construction site that constantly renews itself, and raw honey delivers the tools it needs: active enzymes, antioxidants, antimicrobial compounds. But when the enzymes are dead, those tools are broken. Our body can still use the sugar for energy, but it misses the medicine. Each of the trillions of cells in your body is surrounded by membranes that need protection from oxidative stress and bacterial invasion. Natural honey provides hydrogen peroxide on demand, a built-in antibiotic factory. However, pasteurized honey is stiff and inactive. It cannot generate this defense. When your body unknowingly consumes this heat-killed product, expecting medicine, it gets calories but loses the biological support system. What does it mean for honey to be dead? It means the breakdown of its therapeutic function. For example, when you have a wound, your body needs localized antimicrobial action. Raw honey applied topically activates on contact, generating peroxide that floods the wound bed, oxidizing bacterial cell walls. But if the honey has been pasteurized, the enzyme machinery doesn't work. The wound might get coated with sugar, which provides minimal osmotic protection, but the bacteria aren't actively killed. Infections that raw honey would eliminate in days persist for weeks with pasteurized honey. Think about this. For thousands of years, humans used honey as frontline medicine. Yet modern food science made your honey sticky for profit instead of functional for health. So honey doesn't just sit there passively. The industrial process you trusted turned it into a trap that steals the healing potential. Honey is supposed to be your ally against infection, but you have coated it with heat damage. Furthermore, nature has a defense system built into raw honey. A critical enzyme called glucose oxidase normally protects wounds against bacterial colonization, acting like a peroxide generator. When you consume pasteurized honey, you suppress this protective mechanism. So while robbing the honey of enzymes on one hand, you turn off the healing system on the other. The result? Your honey remains completely defenseless against its purpose. We blamed bacteria for infections, whereas the real saboteur was pasteurization. Raw honey was just an innocent medicine at the crime scene. The second industrial assault on honey is ultrafiltration. After heating, commercial honey is forced through ultrafine filters that remove all pollen, propolis fragments, and beeswax particles. The stated reason is clarity and smoothness. The real reason is darker. Pollen is honey's fingerprint. Forensic analysis of pollen can trace honey back to its botanical and geographic origin. This is inconvenient for industrial honey suppliers who blend cheap honey from multiple countries, some spiked with high fructose corn syrup. Under international standards, honey without pollen isn't legally honey. It's a different product entirely. But pollen isn't just a tracer, it's nutritionally valuable. Bee pollen contains amino acids, vitamins, enzymes, and flavonoids. Raw honey, with intact pollen, has measurably higher antioxidant capacity than filtered honey. When you strip the pollen, you strip part of the medicine. Then, there's HMM, hydroxymethylfurfuryl. This compound is a degradation product formed when fructose is exposed to heat. Fresh, raw honey has HMF levels below 10 milligrams per kilogram. But as honey is heated, HMF accumulates rapidly. Studies show pasteurized honey can exceed 4080 mg calories. Why does this matter? HMF is the forensic evidence. High HMF proves the honey has been cooked. It means enzymes are denatured, vitamins degraded, and biological activity compromised. Medieval beekeepers never pasteurized, never filtered. They extracted honey by crushing honeycomb, straining it through cloth to remove large wax chunks, and jarring it. The honey was cloudy, thick, and alive. It contained active enzymes, intact pollen, traces of propolis, and royal jelly remnants. Anglo-Saxon medical texts, like Bald's Leech Book, prescribed honey-based salves for eye infections and deep wounds. Modern researchers recreated these recipes and tested them. The honey had to be raw for the medicine to work. The contrast is brutal. Medieval honey was a single origin, minimally processed, enzyme-rich medicine. Modern honey is a heat-treated, enzyme-dead commodity. One heals wounds, the other sweetens tea. That's not progress. That's degradation. Buchstwals. Now let's talk about what honey is supposed to be when it hasn't been murdered by heat. Honey isn't just sugar and water. It's a biotechnological marvel engineered by 50,000 worker bees over 6 weeks of coordinated labor. A single bee will visit roughly 2 million flowers to produce 1 pound of honey. Think about the scale of that operation. Each flower's nectar is collected in the bee's honey stomach, mixed with enzymes the bee secretes from specialized glands in its head. then passed mouth to mouth between worker bees who continue adding enzymes and partially digesting the sugars. Finally, the pre-processed nectar is deposited into hexagonal wax cells, and thousands of bees fan their wings continuously for days to evaporate water through airflow, reducing moisture content from 70% down to below 18%. The result is a supersaturated sugar solution infused with antimicrobial enzymes, phenolic antioxidants, organic acids, and trace minerals. This is not a commodity. This is a living biological matrix, a pharmacy crafted by insects through millions of years of evolutionary refinement. The enzyme profile of raw honey reads like a pharmacy. Beyond glucose oxidase, there's diastase, which helps digest starches. There's invertase, which breaks sucrose into glucose and fructose. Each enzyme plays a role in honey's stability and medicinal function. The antibacterial mechanism is elegant. When honey contacts bodily fluids, it dilutes. This activates glucose oxidase, which begins generating hydrogen peroxide. The peroxide diffuses into wounds, oxidizing bacterial cell membranes. Simultaneously, honey's acidity, Ha 24.5, creates a hostile environment for pathogens. The osmotic effect dehydrates survivors. It's a three-layer attack: chemical peroxide, environmental acidity, and physical osmosis. No single antibiotic operates on all three fronts, which is why bacteria cannot develop resistance to honey. Historically, honey wasn't just food. Ancient Egyptian papyri list honey in over 500 medical remedies. Roman soldiers carried honey to treat battlefield injuries. Ayurvedic texts describe honey as a carrier substance for herbs. None of this was superstition. Modern clinical trials validate these uses. Studies show raw honey accelerates wound healing and reduces bacterial load significantly more than pasteurized honey. Researchers concluded that thermal processing compromises therapeutic efficacy. Raw honey has substantially higher antioxidant capacity than commercial processed honey. Now let's address the industry myth. Raw honey is dangerous because it can contain botulism spores. Yes, raw honey can carry Clostridium botulinum spores, but here's the context they omit. Botulism from honey is almost exclusively a risk for infants under 12 months, whose gut flora and stomach acidity aren't developed enough to neutralize the spores. For everyone over 1 year old, stomach acid and intestinal bacteria destroy the spores before they germinate. Honey is statistically one of the safest foods humans consume, yet it's the only one stigmatized for a risk that applies to a tiny fraction of the population. Now let's return to one of history's most astonishing validations of ancestral medicine. In the 10th century, an Anglo-Saxon physician compiled Bald's Leech Book. Among hundreds of remedies was a recipe for an eye salve: garlic, onion, wine, ox bile, and raw honey. For 1,000 years, modern medicine dismissed this as medieval witchcraft. Then researchers at the University of Nottingham decided to test it. They recreated the recipe exactly, using raw honey from a local beekeeper. They applied it to biofilms of MRSA, methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus, a bacterium that resists nearly all antibiotics. The result shocked the research team. The 1,000-year-old salve effectively killed MRSA bacteria, not because of the garlic or wine alone, but because the combination created synergy, and the raw honey's enzyme activity was the catalyst. When they tested the recipe with pasteurized honey, efficacy dropped significantly. The enzymes were dead. The peroxide wasn't generated. The magic vanished. This single experiment proved what medieval healers knew empirically. Honey's power isn't in its sugar, it's in its living biochemistry, and that biochemistry dies at high temperatures in industrial heating tanks. Here's the revelation: the purity obsession of modern food culture is a lie. We've been conditioned to believe clear, uniform, particle-free food is superior. But in honey, those particles, the pollen grains, the wax flecks, the cloudiness, are proof of life. Clarity is proof of death. When you see raw honey crystallize, you're watching glucose molecules organize naturally. It's not spoilage. It's structure. But that supermarket honey that stays clear for years, it's been so thoroughly processed that it's chemically inert. So in light of all these scientific facts and historical evidence, where do we go from here? We are living in a moment where the industrial food system is being exposed. Market shelves are still full of heat-killed honey marketed as pure. The labels mislead. The great honey industry transformation has failed us. Replacing living medicine with pasteurized syrup did not improve health. It deprived us of immune support. You now need to make a choice, pick a side. You know that clear honey jar that never crystallizes. If it doesn't say raw and unfiltered, assume it's been heated and stripped, but it doesn't end there. Do not go to the supermarket and buy the cheapest honey, because now you know it's likely heat-treated, possibly adulterated with zero pollen. You need to be a hunter, not a consumer. Your eyes must look for raw and unfiltered labels. Seek out local beekeepers at farmers' markets. Ask them directly, "Do you heat your honey?" If the answer is anything but no, walk away. Real honey is extracted by crushing comb at room temperature, nothing more. Yes, it will cost more, maybe double, but it is thousands of times cheaper than fighting chronic infections or living without immune support. When you bring real cloudy honey into your home, you aren't just buying a sweetener. You are buying glucose oxidase that generates peroxide. You are buying antioxidants. You are buying medicine. You are reclaiming a birthright stolen by industrial efficiency. Don't fear the cloudiness. Fear the factory. Fear the pure and clear lie. The medieval way wasn't about being backward. It was about maintaining nature's integrity. They didn't understand enzyme kinetics, but they knew. When they applied raw honey to wounds, they healed. Today, we have the studies, the proof of why they were right. Demand raw honey without shame. If what you heard in this video made you realize the honey industry has been selling you enzyme-dead imitations, and if you found this information valuable, you can show it with a simple like. Now it's time to be honest. If you opened your pantry right now, what would you find? Clear, perpetually liquid honey, or raw, cloudy honey that's alive? Write honestly in the comments below. And that friend who's been buying the cheapest honey thinking it's all the same, send them this video. Perhaps this will be the greatest favor you do for their health. We will continue to destroy food myths in this series. In the next video, we will expose another health food scam, how modern vegetable oils are extracted with industrial solvents and sold as heart-healthy, while saturated fats we evolved eating are vilified. The biochemistry will shock you. Until then, stay skeptical, stay informed, and most importantly, stay real.